welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a coffee, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now, we are joined by Neil, Refracted Curvature, Brian, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Hello, hello, hello!
Hello, good to have you all, good to be back. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Absolutely none, but they keep on begging the question that there is one. They continually do it, because they keep on talking about all this stuff that happens on a globe of radius 3959 miles without having any geometric sphere edge to measure it with, this radius.
Well, interestingly enough, you cannot curve surface level and have a geometric horizon at the same time. That is not possible.
Do you want to expand on that?
Well, you need level to be a horizontal plane of reference. You need surface level, the primary reference plane, to run parallel to that, and then you're going to describe your differential for the calculation of a geometric horizon. You see it in all their maths. They draw straight lines, and those straight lines are eye level or surface level, and then the geometric horizon will exist below them.
Okay. A globe, Earth, physical, geometric sphere edge horizon. Yes. I had to snap into the mode because we've been arguing about geometric horizons in general. And then it's back into the live show, and when we say geometric horizon, it is the standard, usual Earth curve edge horizon. And what you're describing, as you would normally at this particular juncture of the show, be describing the differential between the surface level, laid down in their maths as a surface level, and eye level, also laid down in their maths as level. And the physical differential between them that they measure, giving them a marked with an X labelled horizon point of geometry on a sphere below the surface level. Doesn't exist, can't exist.
Right. So the surface cannot curve because that's your surface level. That cannot curve if there's such thing as a geometric horizon that actually exists.
Yeah, the problem with basing a globe Earth claim on reality is that you have to derive some form of measurements from reality, and you have to have reality principles line up with how you might actually measure this stuff. Now, you can infer the old switcheroo with the horizon that is actually perceived when you look through a camera versus the marked with an X inferred horizon that nobody can see and nobody can measure, and it's been disclaimed since 2020 that we only get to see a refracted geometric physical Earth curve edge horizon derived from a surface level and eye level differential. That's a flat Earth measurement in the first instance. Now, when people say, oh, they have to include the truth, conspiratards, they have to include the truth. No, they don't. If they're going to reference reality, a lie is generally seated in reality. Let's say you want to avoid lies. Therefore, the best way to reference your lie, your story that isn't true by omission for the sake of argument, is to reference all things that are true. So in this case, when you look at the Earth curve maths, it's got surface level in it. That's the surface level. It's not the Earth curve edge below it in geometry. When you look at things from a perspective that you can never achieve, that's an orthographic view. See in the side of your own head.
But Nathan, this is a point I made in the past, and I made at least one video on it. When they referenced Polaris, now QE made it the same, basically the same exact point actually before I actually did, and before I made the video. When they reference, see, their whole globe comes from elevation angles to Polaris. It's flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris. And this is another place where dip is so important. Because why it's important is because they can't use tangent planes for that plane. They have to be referencing what I mean. They can't use a reference to a tangent plane. They'll have to have a tangent plane for their angle, but they have to reference a globe's geometric edge within that plane. They have no way out of it because
I've got to
if you
stop
look at what
you.
they
Just
say,
rephrase
if you
it
look at what
differently.
they say,
Just rephrase it so people understand and can follow. When you say they've got to reference a geometric edge, what you mean by that is they've got to reference their Earth curve, which is their horizon, because it's marked with an X and labelled horizon and geometric and globe shaped. That's what they think the horizon is. So when you say they've got to refer to a geometric Earth curve edge, or however you phrased it, we're still talking about the same thing. We're talking about a horizon that will be measured potentially with a tool, but their horizon isn't the horizon. But it has to be, which is why this breaks down. I just wanted to make it clear that we're talking about Earth curve, and that Earth curve, Brian, saying they have to reference with a tangent plane. They don't have, but it's the horizon that's going to be the downfall. And I want people to be clear that we're talking about the horizon. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I don't use the word horizon with them because they don't technically have an horizon. So maybe being a bit over technical, the way the slope zero. But anyway, back to the point that I was trying to make is that for them, they can't claim 7/6 and greater than 7/6R when it comes to Polaris. They have to be referencing the actual surface of their globe. That's what they have to do. Because this is my point. They back-engineered flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris that gave us our latitude and longitude grid. But if you look at their actual claim concerning their angles to Polaris, the horizon is always their globe's geometric horizon, always, because it has to be. It can't be a refracted horizon or any other silly nonsense that debunks their geometry anyway. But the point is they can't claim that there. They must reference the surface of their globe and nothing else when it comes to Polaris. And that's why the flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris, right, to Polaris, creating the latitude and longitude grid, and then it's being back engineered mathematically to create a globe, right? That's why that's so important. Not only does it prove that they needed a flat Earth to do that, but when it comes to their claims concerning Polaris, they can't claim that the horizon is a refracted position. Because the only way for it mathematically, if you look at that, 1 second, let me finish. If you look at it, because they have it orthographically, the only way for it mathematically to work is that there is no 7 or greater than 7/6R. They were referencing the actual physical globe itself. That's the only way it works.
You invoked the tangent plane.
Hold on, someone else is trying to get a word over you. Whoever that is, let me know and I'll let you go next. No? No one have been into it? Go ahead, John.
Right. They may try to say that eye level or surface level is a tangent plane, but for them to correlate it to reality, they must label it as such. And it is always done if you are going to have a geometric horizon calculation. So when they talk about points of tangency, well, what are we going to call these points of tangency? And that's when you start laughing at them.
Yeah, but I think you've kind of missed my point a little bit, because that's kind of, I'm not disagreeing with that, but it's a bit of a red herring away from my point. The point is that if you look at what the claims they must make concerning Polaris, right, and their angles to Polaris, what blocks the mariner's view, right, what causes the apparent right and fall rate of Polaris is that the mariner is either going back down over the curve of their Earth or coming up over the curve. And the blocking point is their physical, right, geometric horizon. That's their blocking point. Right? There is no refraction. There's no 7/6R greater than 7/6R. They can't do that because the whole point of this is that they're trying to claim that this is how you get latitude. They can't claim, and because you can't get latitude with a refracted horizon. Do you know what I mean? They don't
Yeah,
have latitude.
You can't calculate a physical geometric horizon without surface level and eye level being parallel friggin' planes. The argument, there's no argument past that.
Just don't call it a red herring. Just acknowledge it, Brian. Just say yes,
John,
Brian.
sorry, not that I disagree.
I get what you're saying. He's not arguing against you. Therefore, if you calling it a red herring is going to make it sound like he's trying to disagree with your point, or offering up a counter argument that's not relevant to your point to distract from your point. And I don't think he's doing that.
But it's still a red herring, even if it's not intentional.
Okay.
So if it deals with the primary use of language and the words that you're using, if it deals with the primary source and language that you're using about the geometric claims you're making, it's a red herring. Got it.
I don't mean this in a bad way, Nathan, but I know from the way you're after speaking there that you don't actually get yet what I'm talking about. The importance of what I'm talking about.
Did you just hit me with the you don't understand?
I'm sorry. It's
you're faking the front, Nathan.
Because what you just said earlier, you said they need to adhere to physical reality. You were talking about their globe. If it's a globe, they'll have to adhere to physical reality. This is where they must adhere to their. This is the one place that they must adhere when it comes to Polaris. They must adhere to their globe's geometric horizon. They must do. That's the only way for the calculation to work. And the reason they have to do that is because it comes from flat plane measurements.
Yeah.
Where they
on that note, just a quick shout out to an audience member. How's that geometric horizon working out for you, Rufy? Good? Good? Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Negative.
Which gravity you looking for evidence on?
Come again?
If it's
hold on. When you say which gravity, you're giving validity to gravity. I don't like that.
Well, specific gravity can be proven through scientific method.
That's not gravity.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. It's specific gravity.
You're giving it a name. What is it really then?
Relative density.
Sorry, I gotta get on mute. I'm sorry. I'm freaking can't get off
You're asking excellent questions. Why is it that when you're asking the most pertinent questions, you feel like you need to disappear or go on mute? What the hell? He's literally left. He couldn't have asked you a more pertinent question, Brian.
I know, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, that's Neil for you. We love him. Maybe this is why. Oh, there he is. Your objections are perfectly legitimate, Neil. Right, you're saying it's not gravity. Okay, well, that's what it's called, specific gravity. Okay, maybe we will, maybe we won't get into what is specific gravity. You've already been told by Brian what it actually is in 2 words, right? Relative density. Okay, so we're all clear that we can arbitrarily ascribe as many gravities as they can. And one of the gravities has been ascribed this title. It's called specific gravity. Now, you say that's not gravity. Well, okay. Yeah, it is. But likewise, Einstein's fourth-dimensional pseudo-Riemannian fourth space-time bending is gravity. That's what Einstein's gravity is, right? Likewise, Newtonian mass-attracting mass, that's gravity, right? Now, what's that you say? That's how it interacts with our physical reality. No. That's merely an arbitrary description that was blagged to be connected to our physical reality. It has no connection to our physical reality. It's labelled gravity. But in the same way you won't deny what Narnia is, simply because it doesn't exist in physical reality. We know what Narnia is, don't we? And we know what gravity is, don't we? Well, one of the labelled gravities is actually relative density and can easily be scientifically validated. Ergo, I can't disagree when Brian says, yeah, it is gravity, because it is. What do you want me to say? Yeah, you're right, Neil. But your objection gets me to be able to say that.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. Well, that's what they did deliberately so they could get this gravity thing validified. And there is no validity to what they call gravity. Yes, there's relative density, disequilibrium. That's what we experience every day.
Validated.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. There's where the hijacking starts, right? You take a downward vector in the medium of air, right, that you can only measure on a flat plane because it's a change in the horizontal along a vertical path. So you take that and then just turn down into N. And most people never even catch the slip.
It's shown multiple times on this reel that goes by in the chat. So at various different points, you'll see a stretched out blue piece of rubber with a ball thrown into it, which is the visualization of bent 4D space-time. Well, hang on a second. Isn't that merely a three-dimensional demonstration? Yeah, it is, yeah. What about when they show a sun in a, like, fabric with, like, this mesh that goes down to a point with the globe and the sun in it? What's that? Well, that's a three-dimensional representation on a 2D screen. Where's the fourth dimension? Well, no, there ain't one. It's just a 3D picture. But the mesh bit, the bent bit, that's well, that's time. Right there. I mean, it's static, and you know you can count the frames if you like. But what are we doing here?
They do it. They do admit that you need an imagination for 4D.
It's purely conceptual.
Well, the dimension part would be wrong because time is not a dimension. It
Right.
lacks orthogonality or magnitude, so it's not a dimension.
Right. It's made of an extra dimension. Well, then you can get it really confusing, can't you? If you're going to move away from a physically claimable in the reality that we could experience and therefore testable by experiment force of mass attracting mass, and you're going to supersede it, but you still need a downward bias at 1g, well, that's really all you need, people to understand that you've got 1g. When you're sat there doing nothing, what's that, 0? No, 1g. Falling around the world is 1. Nah, that's 0. You understand? Why?
You just did it for him, though.
Hold on, let me just get to the why. Why? Bent 4D pseudo-Riemannian force space-time bending. It's Einstein. You don't understand that stuff. You don't? I just understand that falling is 0 and sitting doing nothing is 1. You got that? Easy. Done. Go ahead, John.
Right. You just did it for him right there when you took down and turned it into a round or in, right?
Orbits,
Because that's not what
obviously
down
orbits.
is.
Obviously begging the question, based on a flat plane measurement of star movement, orbits, obviously.
Yeah, but down, when you're talking about gravity, is in relation to the flat plane. It's a movement in the vertical vector. It has nothing to do with in towards a sphere or around a sphere.
It is if I derive measurements of a flat plane of the angular motion of the stars, and then I can call that an orbit. Kepler did exactly that.
Don't make him right.
Nah, but it means you can reify a sphere out of that. So, sphere. Well, any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety? Any evidence that we're moving, spinning, turning, hurtling through space at an astronomical speed?
Are you talking about rotation now or the movement through space?
Strictly speaking, I'm only asking for axial rotation.
Right. Well, wouldn't aerospace have to take that into account? You know, companies like NASA?
NASA make it explicitly clear that Earth is not rotating, or to use their vernacular, non-rotating.
Well, that's going to be tricky then for their other claim, isn't it? That we're rotating.
When you say other
So
claim,
according to NASA,
hold on,
we're not
I
rotating
object.
anyway.
What do you mean other claim? There's only one claim in that.
Yeah, but they also claim that we're on a rotating globe.
Which you did it again. Also claim. What was their first claim?
Actually, now that I say it, I have yet to hear them claim that. I've yet to hear NASA claim we're on a rotating globe. Now, they might allude to it and show photographs and different things, but I've never heard them actually claim that.
That's fascinating.
I'm being naive.
No,
And maybe we
that's
could
not
look
the
into that.
claim.
But I've still got my same objection on the table. Right. What's their first claim if this is their other claim? What was the first claim they made? Okay, so claim we're spinning, and you're saying, well, I don't even know that they claim that. okay, I'm pretty sure we've got a globe Earth claim with the Coriolis effect asserted to be attached to it, but nevertheless, what's their first claim? If that's the only claim, that it's moving.
Non-rotating. Non-rotating.
That's not a claim.
What
do you mean non-rotating? Dispelling with an idea that somebody has as a presupposition that we are rotating as a positive claim, dispelling that is not a positive claim.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. You have me completely confused here. Yes, what's the first claim? I don't know what they're talking about. You're after completely losing me.
Okay, well, let me try and lay it out for you. Okay, right. Let's say for the sake of argument that you sat where you are, doing nothing, right? I come along and say, no. When you're sat doing nothing, you're actually spinning through 360 degrees, always. And you qualify what I mean with you, and I mean that physically, like you're on a wheelie chair, you're actually turning about where you're turning, and that you're going to move around your room, and you're like, I'm looking at my computer the entire time, and I say, no, you're rotating. And you go, what? So when I'm looking at my computer, you're rotating, and I go, no, you're not looking at your computer, you're rotating. And you look at me and go, you're nuts. And I go, no, I've got a positive claim that you're rotating. Now, you turn around to me and say, nah, I'm not rotating. That's absurd and stupid. And I go, ha, prove you're not rotating, Brian. You've got a positive claim now. As you sit looking at your computer, not rotating, not doing anything, not moving, but I've just come along and said you are, therefore you've got to prove that you're not. How is that a positive claim? Because some dickhead comes along and tells you that you are moving, suddenly the fact that you aren't has to be proven. No. Non-existence is not something I ever will have to prove or be charged with proving. You say we're not moving. What? No. You've got a positive claim that we are. Prove that. That's a positive claim. No, you say we're not. No, you automatically assume that we are and then think that it's a positive claim that we're not. No, I don't have to prove non-existence. It's not a positive claim to say we're not rotating. It's only asserted because there's a fundamentalist religious belief that we are turning. But to turn around to somebody with a positive claim that we are turning that they haven't proven and say, no, we're not, doesn't require positive evidence for that assertion when you haven't proved the first instance claim that we are moving. That's the only claim.
You asked, is there any evidence for axial rotation? I said, if there was, aerospace would have to take it into account. I said, companies like NASA. And then I think it was you or me brought up the citation that they say they're flying over a non-rotating plane. Yep. I don't know where it went after that. I know you're pointing out that it's not a positive claim. The claim we're not rotating when we're sitting here not rotating. I get that.
That's it. That's my only point. It's only because you phrased it as they've got another claim that we are rotating, like non-rotating, stationary, or plane. Now, the plane bit must be physically demonstrable if you're going to claim it. Yeah? That is to say, well, you've got to assert physical measurements in some form or another to make that claim, or a principle that applies to that as a plane for that to be a positive claim. Fine, I can accept that. But when it comes to non-rotating, it blows my mind that anybody can in any way feel that they've got to justify or defend an Earth that's not spinning. I don't have to justify that. It's outrageous to even assert that it's a claim, is my point. And you've picked up on that. And it's just when you said their other claim after non-rotating. Non-anything. What? As soon as I hear the word non before something, it's like, if this gets turned around and told to me that I've got to prove something, it's like, no, you don't understand how a positive claim works. Prove you weren't at the murder scene. There's a murder that happened up the road from me, Brian. Prove you weren't there. How dare you? Prove I was there. That's the attitude, isn't it? Am I wrong?
Right. But under that, would it be acceptable to say prove that level is a horizontal plane?
Is it reasonable to put in the court documents that we explicitly state Brian's non-presence at the crime scene? This has not been justified or proven. What, my non-presence at the crime scene hasn't been proven? Yeah, you better get on with proving that you weren't there. How dare you? Prove non-spinning. Get lost. Prove it is moving.
Hold on, that's an excellent illustration, Nathan. That's a good one.
I never made a negative statement in what I said, though. Would you take that as a positive claim?
Repeat it.
Level is a horizontal plane.
Only in the face of a fundamentalist religious sphere earth zealot belief that it's not. The same way NASA's got to declare non-rotation. How do you make it into a positive claim? It is what it is, isn't it?
Right. And even in their maths or when they try to describe it or measure it, level will be a horizontal plane. That will never change. Only in their rhetoric, when they deny their own claims, will that ever change.
The principles of a horizontal plane are applied to Earth. That is the long and short of it, isn't it? So it's like, how can you turn a practical application into a positive claim?
It's just axiomatic. That's the thing. You know, it's not really a positive claim. It's just what is.
Yeah, it's axiomatic. You're right. As opposed to, I assert, as a positive assertion, that Earth is anything other than how we fundamentally deal with it. Like, well, that's how we fundamentally deal with it, though. What are you saying, other than stating the bleeding obvious? I sometimes ponder how we've been taken onto a globe to only come to the conclusion that if something has no positive assertion or seems blatantly obvious, in some ways it's easier to convolute it into a positive claim. Because, well, you just took it for granted. It was never being asserted. Let's say at the point that somebody comes up with the idea of a globe, right, nobody's questioning it because it's beyond question. Therefore, well, if nobody's questioning it, all the more ease will be offered when we come to lie about it. If it's something that someone's always questioning, maybe that's where their weakest point is, because people have always questioned what the sky is, haven't they? Right? That's the whole purpose of NASA. That's where the most money's spent. What am I talking about? It's where they plumb all the cash. That's me thinking they don't fundamentally own the sky in terms of propaganda. Yeah, they do. What am I doing? I've been detached from NASA for too long. There's loads of propaganda about what the sky is. They claim you can go and find land there. Right? Oh, we live in such a strange world.
Yeah, so guys out there that are listening, be careful about letting someone trick you up into something that's axiomatic being twisted into being a positive claim, because I've heard people try to do that, which is ridiculous.
Well, John,
Oh, Dell tries to do it all the time.
Who does?
John,
Dell.
Oh, their whole shtick is to put you in false dichotomy with a non-positive claim being asserted so they can take apart your garbage evidence for an axiomatic non-positive claim. Like, we're not moving. That's got no positive assertion to have you fight against. No, you say it's not moving and you haven't proved it. I've got a counter-argument to step against it. Let's hear what you've got. Let's hear what you've got. Let's hear what you've got. I'm going to expose you. What, for my non-positive claim? I'm going to expose you. You haven't proved you weren't at the crime scene whatsoever. All right. Expose how I wasn't there. Go ahead. What you got? Sure, was there? What, bugger all? Well, it'd be really easy, or much easier, to hide behind the fact you've got absolutely nothing to offer against my lack of non-positive evidence. Yeah, that's a really good false dichotomy to have your opponent argue if they're a Dumbo.
They want you to explain entropy, Nathan. They want you to explain why things go different ways, why things go down and things go up. So basically they're saying you have to put your foot in the ground somewhere. So what's it going to be, Nathan? Are you claiming stationary Earth?
Not a positive claim.
I don't say what? Why do you have to say what? Why do you have to explain how or why for what is? That is the dumbest thing I've ever. Just stop for. Why would you have to give an explanation for what is? It's what is. Don't let people drag you into stupid stuff. Just don't let
when you're dealing with a Dellite, that's what you're going to get.
Well, I ain't saying anything about the person they're following. The question is malformed. What are you asking for an explanation for, Narnia? Okay, there's an explanation for Narnia. Does that make it real?
How good's your explanation? Can you put it in false dichotomy with me saying it's not Narnia and not real? If you can stack that up in false dichotomy, I might believe you. Right, I'm going to shout out a few of the people in chat as I'm trying to incorporate more of an interactive show, so to speak. Hello, Michael Khan and RJC. Good to have you all. Any proof of the downward acceleration? Says RJC.
There you go.
What downward acceleration? I'm looking up at clouds. Nice to have you, though. DJ D637, nice to have you. Good to see you in the chat. G-Force Band, or G-Force Bond, is it? Good to see you. What about asteroids? That's a good question. What about asteroids? What asteroids? The Omega Etty, good to have you. Divergent Droid, nice to see you. Mr. Jones, whoever's got their indicator open in G+, can you just close your mic a sec? Elvis, nice to see you. TB, good to have you. What else we got in there? Bible U. Actually, shout out to all of the moderation team. Good to have you all. INFE, nice to see you. Lots of LOLs and hellos and kisses to Paula. What else we got? Any questions in there? Who's off mute? Is it you, Refracted? Go ahead. What did you want?
Well, he brought up asteroids or comets. Which one was it?
Asteroids. Asteroids specifically.
Okay, asteroids. That means that they've not entered the atmosphere within the heliocentric belief system that's derivable from angle measurements from a flat Earth. Yeah, asteroids require a flat Earth for that belief, but that is contradictory to the world's experience.
Sure, but there's a physical connection that's been asserted in terms of rocks that would be soil physically coming from the sky. People are under the impression that that actually happens. Now, maybe. I mean, I've not encountered any evidence of that, but maybe people can point me in the right direction where they've got first-hand evidence of somebody showing a rock coming from the sky. But what John's saying is your notions of rocks coming from space involves rocks coming from space. And space is a derivation of a measurement that gives you orbits, that gives you a sphere Earth with a vacuum to be around it for rocks to come from. And that requires a flat Earth and a plane, and you can't have violations of natural law for rocks to come to us from. So from the narrative point of view, it's a nonsense. But from the ideas that I know people have from a lot of movies, and even claim to be encounters with rocks that are found on the ground that are said to have come from the sky. But in terms of tying those two things together, regardless of whether or not it's come from a sky vacuum or not, I know the story's out there, but if people can send me, email me, Nathan Oakley 1980 at AOL.com, if you want to send me a link to something that I can go, okay, that looks like an actual video of a sky rock landing in front of somebody and then picking up and going, bloody hell, that's hot, or whatever. I don't care. But if you can show me that soil comes from the sky, I'll be intrigued.
But it still won't change the nature of the surface you're standing on.
No. And the story that derives a spherical sky vacuum-based orbital motion in Keplerian worlds of priest-derived explanations for how the stars will move, which is all we've really got. Right, did I say hello to everyone in the chat? Tanya, nice to see you. Price of Adam, good to see you. I think I've said hello to pretty much everybody. Go ahead, whoever that was.
Yeah, I suppose I have to address it. I didn't want to be doing this because I don't want to be. I don't know. Neil, would you please stop bringing up Dale and all this other nonsense, please. We were on a good topic. There was stuff to talk about. Now I have to. As soon as this comes up, I have to address it.
Come on, Brian, stop.
I don't want it's stop.
He made a point and I said something. I might not be catching everything, Brian, but come on.
The direction you brought it that direction. We didn't need to be talking about. Now
yeah, Neil.
Brian, it's still stuff that's being dealt with. Come on, just get back on your topic, bro.
No, I have to deal with this now, right? Because I've dealt with it every time it comes up. I deal with it, right? And I've dealt with it with a video I made. There is no weight within the paradigm
Just going to stop because you came out with a video,
Hang on, I'm going to solve the problem as you brought up the topic. There is no weight in the paradigm Dell and them are promoting. Weight does not exist. That's from Dell's own admission to me when he was on this show. Now, how does a weighing scales work? Weighing scales requires a solid, right, stationary plane underneath it and something on top of it putting pressure down upon the scales, upon the springs, right? That means something would have to be pressing down upon it. Now, that would mean within their paradigm that if I stood on the weighing scales and Nathan stood on the weighing scales and John stood on the weighing scales and Neil, you stood on the weighing scales, that it would have to always be the same. There would never be any difference. That actually, because there's no pressure going down on the springs, right, because there's no downward pressure and I have no weight, Nathan has no weight, John has no weight, you have no weight, then their scales will always read zero. Always. Because the only movement is up, right? I don't have weight to put pressure against the movement that's coming up within their paradigm. So if the Earth is moving up, and I have no weight, then I have no weight, so no inertia, so there's no way for me to put pressure on those scales. So it's not even that the scales would read 10 pounds for each one of us. It would read zero for all of us all the time. Everything. You put a car on the scales, it would read zero. Everything reads zero because there is no weight. There is only an up, there is no force down. For that scales to have a reading upon it, the weight needs to exist, right? And for weight, if weight exists, then their paradigm is finished. And it does exist, as we know, because we have weighing scales and can weigh things on it. That's the problem. That's completely destroyed. I don't care what effects they see, whatever they are, they don't have any connection to an upward moving Earth, as weighing scales debunks that notion. Weighing scales also debunk Einstein, right, who had a similar notion. You can't have weight and not have weight. You can't have two. It's paradoxical. So if there's no weight within that paradigm, and there isn't, right, then there's no way for weighing scales to ever register a weight. Because there's no downward force. There's only up. I mean, I would require, even if the Earth was moving up, right, even if the Earth was moving up, I would require a downward force to cause a reading on a scales. But if I don't have any downward force, which I don't within that paradigm because I don't have weight, then the scales will always read zero for everything and everybody. That's the end of Dell.
So, Brian, you're saying they're trying to use this paradigm with what they're trying to say is going on, and they can't do that?
Well, if Dell stands on the scales and it reads, I'd say Dell's a big guy, so it probably reads about 17, 18 stone, right? That's the end of his paradigm that he's trying to promote. The fact that he can stand on the scales and it shows him his weight is the end. Because the whole point of the upward moving Earth is that there is no down. The down is only apparent. That there is no weight. Things aren't falling down because they have weight. They're not falling through the air because they have weight or density. It doesn't matter. There is no downward force. It doesn't exist within our paradigm. There is only an upward force. Right? If there's only an upward force, then I don't have any inertia because I don't have any weight. So I can't press on the scales to cause the scales to have a reading. Because I don't have any inertia. So if I have no inertia, then I can't resist acceleration or constant movement. I can't do that. I have no resistance against that because I don't have any weight. That's their paradigm. That's what they're claiming.
One of those subjects that seems to be part of Flat Earth to keep us arguing amongst ourselves in some form or another. So there's all sorts of examples of it. You know, when I first arrived, it was concave. You've got Ethereum. You've got upward rising Earth. What else you got? There's a whole bunch of them, right? That are just inserted in. If they're not inserted into the actual narrative of Flat Earth, they're brought along or dragged along into the house, like dirty, muddy boots from the path that people have walked to get here, which is to say we have to deal with clone centers, Mandela effect, you know, the list of nonsense tosh that we have to deal with goes on and on and on also, doesn't it? Well, these subject matters are just folly, and 9 times out of 10 they've got a direct connection to something paralleling heliocentrism to keep that in the argument. You know, that's where their tell is, if you ask me. In this case, it's the equivalence principle, right? E equals MC squared, right, Craig? Nevertheless, you know, it's just tied to heliocentrism. You've got Einstein's upward moving Earth. In terms of what he's actually describing, all he's got is my example of you're moving at 1 when you're doing nothing. That's it. That's all it is, right? It's just a way of moving the scale. Well, they move it the opposite way because it's just as absurd, but it parallels Einstein quite nicely. So it's useful to have that held up in false dichotomy when there's no positive claim, and the same applies to Einstein if you want to boil it back into heliocentrism, which is all this is. Same with concave. What are the measurements? Oh, exactly the same as the radius of a sphere Earth, that you'd have with you living on the outside, obviously. So what, it directly parallels the sphere Earth claim then? Yeah, it uses the same stuff. It's like, all right, shocking.
Yeah. And the simple things debunk these things, like, for instance, the concave out, dip correction, aerospace, debunks that. You know what I mean? Those simple things debunk it. The upward moving out, wave scales debunk it. It's always the simplest things that debunk all these. Claims of the ether. It's always the simple stuff. You know what I mean? That debunks all this stuff. But people,
my son threw Hollow Earth at me the other day. That's what he's starting to. So it's still a sphere, but it's hollow now.
That's concave.
I don't know.
Hollow Earth is a sort of amalgamation of flat Earth and concave, but without sphere Earth measurements. So just an idea that there's like a cave system. So somebody, I think, was an adherent to this was the guy who's on the chronological monoscope. That guy used to babble on about concave as well. Not concave, Hollow Earth. Also, was one of the famous Admiral, not Byrd, a different one.
Admiral Byrd, the Longines chronoscope.
Yeah, he was one. There was another one as well. But there's a few different proponents of Hollow Earth, which is different to concave Earth. But that's another one on the list. It's just another crappy insertion to have us talking about nonsense, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, now it's really useful if you can get.
Wait, are you talking about Cook, Colonel Cook?
Could be Cook. Go ahead, John.
Did he not hear me?
Oh, I was about to say really you were in the middle of a sentence when he started. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, John, I didn't hear you.
Okay, you can hear me though, right?
I just heard you now. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I was going to say though about the false dichotomy arguments that were prevalent several years ago and still are. If you're going to argue about what is causing down, the force of down, or in any way, if you do choose to do that as a flat earther, don't argue the cause of down with the glober, because there is no down with respect to a sphere.
So lay the ground.
Well, what is there then, John?
No, what he's saying is if you're going to argue with it, you're going to say you need a flat earth to argue this. If we're going to talk about downward bias, downward vector, anything that's with respect to a vertical axis orientation, it will, in all instances, be with respect to a horizontal plane of reference. Therefore, to argue gravity requires a flat earth. To require a flat earth to derive measurements that will also give you orbital motion. It's the same principle, right? If you're going to start arguing that we've got an orbital motion, how do you get your measurements? Off a flat plane? Well, how are you going to get a downward orientation when they've got an around? I got around it right at the start of the show, didn't I, John? When I sneakily, because I'm looking for the, I can't remember the fallacy I was trying to highlight. I think it was the fallacy of omission when I'm trying to insert geometry to a rainbow to assert it back onto a non-geometric claim to be physical limitation called Earth curve, right? Well, if I can somehow get that fallacy of division in, then, you know, that's where the trick fails. If you can point it out, you obviously caught it immediately. Well, same principles apply here, don't they? In my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I was one of the other reasons I brought that up, because I think the plane of reference has been taken for granted so long that, you know, the world has just forgotten.
Yeah. If you weren't questioning that aspect of physical reality that you always utilize, it's not up for debate because it's not going to be made into a positive claim, as you said earlier, John, then that makes it far easier, if you exclude the sky vacuum aspect of it with entropy, although that is the discussion, then the flat plane aspect of asserting a downward bias is really easy. You just measure the flat plane, make an assertion, exclude the upward items, you know, reposition your downward density as a 1g force, or a force that's a mass attracting mass force, whatever you want to do. But you're always going to be referencing a flat plane in the first instance to make your claim. As long as that's ignored. Same with celestial navigation. How'd you get these angles to work on a flat plane? The ones that only came from a flat plane measurement. As long as you can step over that first point that the flat plane's got to be utilised and measured in every single example, because you're going to cross-reference your lie about it being a globe with the reality of the measurements that you will be taking. That's why all roads lead to a flat Earth, right? Back at this point, 6 months ago.
Yeah, it's because you started with one. You know, you're always going to end up back. You know, it's not circular. It's kind of like Genesis.
But don't argue with the globe about the second
everything.
order effect of entropy, which is to say, how are you going to describe a down or up of anything in the world that we experience? Well, you're going to describe it with how time, the arrow of time, affects everything that we experience. That's described within the second law of thermodynamics. And when you've got a system in place based on that constant flow of entropy, then you can describe how something in that system may interact if it's in disequilibrium. Ergo, an effect of disequilibrium can be described as a second order effect of entropy. But does that give you a cause? Absolutely not. Because where do you end up? You end up with a description of things that occur always, in this case, the arrow of time. Okay? Does that tell you how it was caused? No. So what do you have to do to find out how it was caused in the first place? Rewind time to the beginning of existence? You joking? No. That's the only way to do this. Where do you end up then? Well, you end up at a specific set of questions called the ontological primitives. Did the world start from a giant bang, essentially dividing nothing by zero and getting everything in the known existence, aka the Big Bang, invented by a man called Lemaitre? Or do we have evidence that would suggest that in order to have anything in physicality, we must first have knowledge, and therefore a knower? That is the order of our physical reality as we know it to date. Once you exclude one possibility, that would be a first law of thermodynamics violation, nature creating itself, you are only left with one alternative. So when you start looking at what causes things to go down, in that ignorant world where only things go down, you end up at first a realisation that that simply isn't the case. Then you realise that it's a second order effect of entropic law, which is merely a description that leads you to a question about how the world began. And where does that lead you? Figuring out that there's a God. That there must have been an external force to create what we experience as our known universe. Not the universe of sky vacuums derived from flat plane measurements, but the universe we actually inhabit. Flat.
Well, for the Big Bang to have happened, matter and energy had to already exist.
No, they divide by zero. Look at Lemaitre and what he actually describes mathematically. It's divide by zero, get everything in the known existence.
Incorrect.
Nah, that's baloney.
No, matter
Brian's
and energy
right.
had to already exist. Before any Big Bang, there had to already be matter and energy.
No, that's incorrect. You're describing the point of singularity moments after the Big Bang.
No, I'm not.
You are. In their mathematics, you have a point where there's nothing. Then you have...
No, the first law of thermodynamics.
Oh, sorry, not Lemaitre's Big Bang, but yes, you're talking about the actual law that concludes that.
Yeah. Their claim is debunked by the fact that matter and energy had to already exist.
Right, yes. You're not offering that as an excuse for Lemaitre. You're saying that's how it debunks it. My bad.
Yes, completely.
Yeah, my bad. I misunderstood what you were saying. Yeah, absolutely. The first law of thermodynamics debunks the Big Bang. That's the end of that. And you don't even have to offer the alternative. You don't have to offer the other ontological primitive other than their answers for how the world, which is non-spherical because you're measuring it off a flat plane to give you that inference, doesn't come into existence. And that question leads you on to why do things go down, which isn't even a question. Some things go up.
Well, technically, the vacuum of space debunks the vacuum of space. It's a paradox. Because we know in reality that a vacuum requires a container, but there's no container for the heliocentric space. So it would be impossible for a vacuum to require a container in reality if it was possible to have a vacuum without a container. So their own heliocentric space debunks their own heliocentric space, because it's either vacuums do require a container or vacuums don't require a container. It's that simple, isn't it?
Well, they require a containment, and again, I don't know if you beat QE to this, but QE was the first to point this out. Not long after he gave us all gas pressure without a container as an argument, which is to say, same thing applies to a vacuum itself. Can you have a vacuum without a container? It doesn't matter which way you ice that cake.
Well, I've said it before. There's three things you can't have without containment. You can't have temperature, you can't have pressure, and you can't have a vacuum. You can't have any of those things without containment. What is a vacuum? It's a lack of pressure. How do you create a vacuum? You remove the pressure.
But you need a container.
You need a container. So the vacuum of space is debunked by the vacuum of space, because the vacuum of space debunks itself, because there's no container.
It's a paradox in a religion of a second law of thermodynamics violation, derived from a flat plane measurement and an inference of a sphere Earth through mere fiat, as far as I can tell. Somebody's just decided at some point to take Keplerian motion, which was only ever utilised to derive better, accurate, predictions of where the stars would be. That's really all it's for. But yet that inference by, like I say, I just see it arbitrary. Somebody's come along and gone, well, that could be inferred to mean we are actually standing on a spherical surface by the way of these motions descriptions by Kepler.
My question is, where were all these... Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say, no, Kepler just took the original sun cycle, Nathan, that required a flat plane, and all the angles to the sun, and all the things the sun was appearing to do as a cycle each year. And that was then extrapolated out as being having an offset elliptical orbit around this sun, because that's within when he amalgamated the original sun cycle, right, which is us observing what the sun is doing, not us moving while the sun is stationary. We observe what the sun appears to be doing. He amalgamated that with the Copernican model, which was a heliocentric model, and he ended up with an offset elliptical orbit of the sun. And then all these other orbits became offset elliptical orbits because they had to make the rest of them the same. It's
all Kepler's trying to do.
No evidence. It starts and ends with the sun. Right, go on.
Well, it does all start and end with the sun, but what all Kepler's trying to do is square a circle for, I can never remember the name of them originally, I think it's epicycles, right? That's all he's trying to do, isn't he?
Well,
no,
he's trying to amalgamate the Copernican model. Go on, John.
Curve plane is what he's doing in terms of the maths and how he's taking what we've already measured. That's correct also. He's going to need a flat Earth for this. That goes without saying. But when he's charged with doing this, all he's trying to do is say, how can I take what we observe from this motion, which in terms of, what do we call them now? Retrograde. How can we take that into a motion, a physical motion that works, right? And the only way you can achieve that is by taking something that's apparent, that is the movement of that particular light. It doesn't matter which one in retrograde motion we're describing, but it's not got any motion, has it? It appears in the night sky and moves across your night sky. The following night sky is slightly different. It's preceding a light that it was closer to the previous night. That's all you've actually got to go on. But if you can take that into an actual motion, an orbit that it's already been is now being refined by Kepler into elliptical orbits, you can then better describe that non-motion. That's all he's trying to do, though, is he? Not, unless I'm misunderstanding.
I would describe it as slides on a projector. Tonight's slide is different from last night's slide. Because in the end of the day, that's all you're viewing. What Kepler was trying to do was amalgamate the original sun cycle, which he got from astrology. Astrology, Aries, Taurus, Libra, Scorpio, all these. He got it from astrology and amalgamate that with the Copernican model. And we don't observe elliptical orbits of anything. We don't observe orbits. None of these things are observed. Right? It's only back calculated from him back calculating, right, the angles that were taken to the apparent sun cycle through the 12-month period and try to amalgamate that into us on a globe orbiting around, rotating around a central sun. That's what that is.
Right, Copernican in nature, like you've said twice.
Yeah, because he's directly involved. Because this is the thing. How do you have a globe without heliocentrism? Can you have a globe and geocentric? Remember the other way they say Tycho Brahe was a geocentrist, but they always try to claim he was a glober. How do you know he was a glober? How can you have a globe and geocentrism? Explain things like eclipses and stuff within their model, within their paradigm, with geocentrism. All these kind of things. I don't think for a moment.
Go on, John.
Go on, John. Come on.
Well, you asked the question, and I think what it is the celestial sphere was immediately convoluted to be the globe. And no one has ever really questioned it, it seems, or I've not seen evidence of anyone questioning, like, why are you using an equatorial plane to claim measurements from the surface if you're, you know what I mean?
Right, the globe burger.
I've never, right, well, not necessarily the globe burger. I'm talking about the actual celestial sphere that they use for navigation, the equatorial plane with the sphere of the heavens wrapped around it. When they see that model, when a glober sees that, they think that's their globe immediately. So if Tycho Brahe had a celestial sphere model in his astrology observation area, then he's a glober to them, because that's how their mind processes the information that they're seeing.
Okay, because it's done in this way. So in modern times, at least in our current depictions, if you Google it, right, it's the Dingleberry versus Globeburger. What you're saying is, if what he's doing is measuring the sky, well, in this diagram on screen now, right, behind where it says Flat Earth Debate, you've got what is essentially the celestial sphere, or half of it, right, in this grid. Well, that would work with this cross-section, the flat bit, being the equatorial plane. Well, when they describe it, they have what we have fondly dubbed the Dingleberry Earth dangling between it, because at some stage when you actually make this functionally operational, if you're going to include a globe around it, you'll have to have the globe higher. That is to say, you inside the globe, this central point, whatever it is, a boat or a plane or whatever it is that's measuring the angle here, that's got to have a globe wrapped around it so that your angle still references the flat plane, the equatorial plane, out at any distance, all flat for your areas of equal elevation. But when a glober looks at this, they say, well, yeah, I'm imagining my tangent plane from my feet. It's no longer a geometric horizon down here derived from the plane. That's the equatorial plane, also known as surface level, when you're doing it this way. They've got a dingleberry dangling beneath it, but that's where they think the process ends. In reality, for it to function, you've got to be in hell with the globe wrapped around you, because the markers that are on the globe are merely a transposition from out here. The angles measured to the sky and the stars transpose back down onto a globe Earth that you're not actually measuring any angles from because you're inside it. But that, in essence, shows you the magic trick. How do you get these points that are measurements off a flat plane out to these points in the sky from a Polaris-centric system to infer that you're on a spherical surface? Well, you just wrap them back round. So then they're wrapped around a ball with you inside it if you're making it functionally work. Well, that doesn't make any sense because you're no longer on the surface. Well, then just remove it one step further. Have it dangling below a great big tangent plane stuck on top of a globe. All of this represents the surface, but that's the globe below it. That's good enough. That's how they've done it. So when John says people haven't recognised the importance of the equatorial plane, it's like, well, what is the equatorial plane? Well, it's the plane that all of these angle measurements of the stars in the first instance, if you're polar-centric, are giving you for points on the ground for latitude and longitude to wrap around a sphere. But that sphere isn't the ground, it's the stars. It's the measurements from a flat plane to the stars that have then been turned into a grid to wrap around a sphere.
Yeah, but when a glober or an anti-flat earther sees a celestial sphere model, they do not see the equatorial plane. All they see is a ball, and it sounds horrible to say this about someone, But they think just because they see a sphere, that means that's what Earth is.
The celestial dome model is based off of a perspective model. It's based off of an orthographic protractor. That's what it is. That's why the protractor is what it is. It's the only way to. The protractor essentially is an orthographic tool. The only way to correctly reference perspective orthographically is through the use of a protractor. It's that curve. Now you could do it with a right angle triangle too, or with a square, blah blah blah. But the protractor does it just nicely with that little curve. They think that there is a dome sky. There is no dome sky. The sky is not a dome, as in there's no celestial dome. It's just a way of describing it. Doesn't actually exist. But these people live within diagrams. The whole world is diagrams. It's not reality, it's diagrams. So when they see a diagram of a globe and this celestial sphere around it, right, that's it now, globe. Not understanding that it's actually the horizontal plane that's running straight through that globe you have in the center, and that extending out into what they call the celestial plane, right? Especially at equinox, which is when they do all their astronomy, right? Right, when there is no tilt, right? Remember, that is what's actually being referenced. There's no globe being referenced, no physical globe being referenced. It's just an orthographic representation of perspective to the celestials, something we don't understand. Right. The best we have is a protractor.
Well, the protractor in this diagram would be represented as the globe. So if you look at the globe in this diagram, right, why does the angle to this star suddenly disappear at the globe surface? Well, it's because the globe itself is the protractor that you'd measure through. So if you imagine this globe cut in half with you standing at the center, which is precisely where the angle's going to, because that's how this works, right? They've hijacked the measurements that Brian's just described with the perspective view of the sky above you, and then taken the measurement tool, which is a semicircle in this instance, a protractor, with you standing. So if you imagine you're in a giant blow-up Zorb ball, you've dug a little hole in the ground the same size as it, or half a hole, and then you stuck it in, and on your Zorb ball that you're standing in, you can see all the measurements of the angles from 0 to 180 across your view, across your field of view through the Zorb ball, right? Well, that means you're standing like in the middle of this globe, like where this angle ends. It terminates in the middle, right? Why? Well, because it's like you standing in the middle of a Zorb ball with all the angles measured out. Well, what are the angles going to? Well, they're going to the celestial sphere. If this is you in, I don't know, with Polaris above you, you're at the North Pole, essentially, right? Well, what they've then done is said, okay, well, if we're standing in the middle of this Zorb ball and all of these points on the outside of what is represented here as a globe measure out to the stars, we can then put the points back onto the Zorb ball and say that's the surface. It's like, no. All you've done is you've turned the protractor that you're measuring the heavens off a flat plane into a globe Earth. And when I'll get Brian to clarify this in better detail. When you take the actual measurements of your protractor, it's then fixed with an equatorial value that terminates with your view of Polaris, which isn't exactly this. This is the plane of the ecliptic in this diagram. But nevertheless, if it was the equatorial plane, Polaris-centric, you've got a point where you can back away from on this plane and see Polaris recede towards the horizon, giving you an effective minimum. And then you can take that effective minimum to give you the outside edge of the protractor that you use to measure that declination towards the horizon as you moved away from it. Well, you've then got a fixed 3959 radius in vague numbers. It's not exactly specific. Brian will maybe cover it a bit more in a minute. That is the effective size of your protractor. And they've just called that protractor a globe. But what is it actually doing? It's got you in the middle with a giant protractor radius 3959 measuring out through the globe that you're no longer standing on out to the celestial sphere. And Brian says it's pathetic, I think it was Brian or John, that they just see a globe. In this case, they'd see the globe of the celestial sphere wrapped around it and go, well, that's the Earth. No, that derivation is come from measurements off a flat plane out with what is effectively a giant protractor view of the stars from your position. That's all it is. Doesn't mean that this is the surface when you transpose this grid back onto a spherical protractor that you're standing in the middle of.
Yeah, what they have to understand is the protractor is an orthographic tool. And when someone talks about your personal celestial dome, they're talking about it's an orthographic way of describing your perspective view to the celestials in a 360 degrees, right, from a center point. That's all it is. There is no dome of the sky. There is no celestial dome. It doesn't exist. It's just a way of transferring perspective view of the celestials that's from 90 down to 0, right, into an orthographic diagram. So this is the thing, their globe is only orthographic because all the measurements come from perspective over a horizontal plane. That's where their globe comes from. The back engineering of perspective measurements of the celestials of Polaris as you move away from it. That's all it is. It's flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris. They have to reference the Earth. And that's why in their diagrams, when they try, and this is what I was talking about earlier, when they want to reference Polaris, they show you an orthographic diagram and a person moving down over their sphere towards the equator, and they'll have the light from Polaris back to parallel light rays, all coming in parallel, and that will create the angles for them. The parallel light rays create the angle for them as they're going down along the surface of their globe. But they have to reference that surface. They can't claim any kind of refracted over 6 horizon or any nonsense like that. They have to actually reference their globe's geometric horizon when they're doing that. Because why did they do that? Because it's an orthographic hijacking of what happened in frontal perspective view in reality, which is flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris. That's where it comes. That's what the latitude and longitude grid comes from. That's what they had to hijack. But the only way they can hijack it is to turn it orthographically. That's the only way they can hijack it. And that's what the celestial dome is, an orthographic representation of perspective. You don't see a dome. I walk out in the nighttime. I don't see a dome of sky. There's no dome sky there. I don't see this. Nobody sees this. The celestial dome can't be observed in reality because you don't view things orthographically in reality. You only view them with perspective.
Perfect. I'm going to do a couple of quick plugs. So, first of all, I'm going to be appearing in the politics server on Friday. So, 3 p.m. UK time, an hour after the show, or after the show finishes, basically. I think it's 3:30 I've arranged it for. So, give me a little bit of setup time. But after Friday's live show, I will either continue members only or something along those lines, but in the politics server. So, I'm going to be doing a Q&A in there, so I'll do a quick plug for that. Also, Quantum Erasers is running a show this evening. So, obviously, if you're watching this live, well, they'll pause the recording now, so you won't get this overlap, which is good. But yeah, this evening there is going to be a broadcast by Quantum Eraser. I think it's the final addition to his Mind Shock critique of a debate that was done about 6 months ago with myself and Patrick Gunnels. So check that out. That's at 10 p.m. And there's also a repeat, because I intentionally have already released this on my main channel, but the 5-hour extravaganza with lots of disagreements about what the horizon is, its geometry, the measurements of Earth, all that good stuff. That has already been released yesterday on this channel, but it will be repeated. So that's going to be repeated while majority of the audience is going to be over on QE's channel, because an hour later that will come out. So go and check out QE's live stream. It's starting at 10 p.m. If you did want to join in on a Q&A session in the politics server, that's where it'll be on Friday. So I think it's 3:30, the actual time that the Q&A will start. And that's it. I'll plug it throughout the week, and that's pretty much it. With that, I'm going to say a massive thank you first and foremost to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching on either primary stream, though, stay tuned, as there will be an after show. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!